It's a right for every man to be free. It's a goddamn privilege to be an American.
Okay, welcome everybody to episode 5 of Kickin podcast. You may notice our table is a little more full today than it is normally. To my left, we have Craig Rosenstein of the Rosenstein Law Firm. And in the middle, Don Seitzinger from US LawShield. He's a territory manager. On the far side, we have Jonathan Goebels of the Rosenstein Law Firm as well. And across the table are the two that need no introduction, Phoenix, Big Joe, from Just a Few Reviews. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So, Don, we'll start with you. I am familiar with the US LawShield service, but our viewers at home may not be. Give us like a little brief overview of what your service entails.
Okay. US LawShield is legal defense for self-defense.
Speaking of the body.
Sell the program. It is legal defense for self-defense. It is not limited to firearms. Okay, and what we provide is state coverage, and I can't talk either. This is my first.
It's not like your job's on the line.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It's a true legal defense for self-defense program. It's what happens after the bang. Okay, when these guys get involved, we provide representation for our members, complete legal representation in civil and criminal lawsuits, with no caps, no deductibles, and no limits.
Excellent. Well, you just knocked out like 3 of my questions there.
I love getting called after the bang.
Right? Gives it a whole different meaning. Okay, so the benefits of the service. What can somebody expect when they sign up for US LawShield?
Well, there are several benefits. Okay, you have 24/7, 365 access to our program attorneys, these two gentlemen sitting next to me, and their law group, essentially. We also offer, on a non-emergency level, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, Q&A, general questions. I'm driving to California with my firearm. What do I need to do?
Leave it behind.
Besides not go. Right. Things like that, which is very beneficial because a lot of people, a lot of gun owners, such as myself when I first purchased here, I thought to myself, what am I doing? What are the laws? What do I need to do? And I didn't have that legal representation at the time. I didn't have a fallback, so you go buy a book and read it. What we provide our members with is the all-around 2A gun education.
We get asked questions quite a bit, and in US LawShield, it's through a portal through them, and it gets sent over to our practice. And we have a policy where we try to return the calls as quickly as possible. It's usually within about 90 minutes. You'll either get a phone call or email response.
These are non-emergency calls, right?
Correct.
24/7.
Like 5, it's working hours. They ask you a question.
The non-emergency.
You have a question at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. We'll get to it on Monday morning. But the reality is, if it's a non-emergency question, like what happens if this happens, or just a question about 2A issues, we try to jump on them as quickly as possible and get responses back. So we try to provide the service that US LawShield sells.
So your membership card, though, when you do join, you get a membership card, and I know these guys have on the back of their membership card, you've got contact members, some very basic instructions on what to do. So I think that most of the times when you're involved in a shooting, when you're having to draw your weapon or whatever, you're dealing with police, the trauma of actually hearing a gunshot and having the lights and all people around you, people get pretty freaked out.
It would be weird if you didn't, right?
Yeah. Basically, that's what we see on the news. That's what we see on these reality TV shows. So I think one of the benefits of being if you have a firearm and you intend to carry it, I can't see not having the service. It's literally crazy not to. In today's society, And I want to get to one of the questions and maybe jump ahead of it. The civil lawsuits. I know that in the state of Arizona, there's some laws concerning the ability to sue the person who does the shooting. And if you lose, if you're the plaintiff and you lose in that case, you have to pay for the court costs and attorney. Am I correct in that assumption?
My understanding, and so I think a flavor of who we are might help a little bit. Right. So I want to make sure I speak out of turn. We have a criminal defense firm. We have 8 attorneys. We do criminal defense almost exclusively. Right. We know as a result a lot of issues surrounding 2A, even when it comes into the civil. US LawShield will hire through us, our recommendations, a civil attorney in that situation. My understanding is that was a bill that was proposed 2 sessions ago. I do not believe that it came out of the legislature. I actually am I know it's a kind of a bad word nowadays, but I'm a lobbyist on behalf of AACJ, which is the Arizona Attorneys for Criminal Justice. So it's the criminal defense bar. Right. And so we were involved and we lended support for, but my understanding is that bill did not actually come out. So I don't believe that you will receive attorney's fees in that situation. Oh. But I know it's a proposed bill, and by the way, they come up every session, so it's one of those things where if it were to come up again, I think it might have more legs depending on the makeup of the legislature. Right. But I don't know. It's a little bit outside of my realm. I'm not confident and comfortable.
But that underscores the need for having representation in a civil situation. Yeah.
I think the civil lawsuit is as important. Now, obviously, listen, when it comes to civil lawsuits, all we're talking about is money, right? Right. That's 100% of what it is. So in a situation like this, it's money. And now, obviously, the wealth you accumulate through your life is important. But when you talk about criminal, they want to put you in a cage. And don't be under any, that is, you can't come back from that a lot. And so for us, the criminal is our primary focus. It's what we like doing. We like helping getting good people out of the criminal justice system. And we see way too many people who enter it in situations that we don't think they should, only because they were executing their 2A rights. And
That's
so,
a nice choice of words.
I'm trying. So it's one of those situations where we see the tragedies of people who are charged with crimes that they shouldn't be charged. Honestly, not convicted, but just even charged. The process of being charged is also one of money, right? Because you have to pay competent counsel. I don't want to shill too much for Don, but one of the benefits is that's covered, where our fees are covered by US LawShield.
And I'll be honest, most of the time, I probably wouldn't spend a whole lot of time discussing a service like this. I mean, there's a billion services in the gun industry, whether it's, equipment or gear or guns or knives, whatever the heck it is that's involved in the shooting sport. There's enough advertising out for that. There's enough marketing out for that. There's really not enough, I would think it's kind of a warning for gun owners. Most people think, hey, look, I didn't do anything wrong. They broke into my house, or I'm walking out to my car in the dark, 3 guys jumped me and I blasted them. That's what I'm supposed to do. But, that's what people think. And, maybe in yesteryear that's the case, but we live in a very litigious society. And, the moment that you decide to carry a gun for self-defense or for any purpose, you immediately take on a responsibility and you take on liabilities that you're not aware of. And that's what I want to get across to our viewers. I have a lot of people that blog on my blog. We have a lot of viewers on our YouTube channels. You got YouTube people say, oh, you got to be careful with gun safety. They're more concerned about whether or not, an empty gun is waving at somebody's foot than they are about, hey, dude, every day you're walking out of the house and you're packing that gun, you don't have any kind of coverage for yourself. You have car insurance, you have home insurance, you have health insurance, but you whack somebody and you're going to be in for a world of hurt regardless if you are justified or not. And justification, like you said, is based on money. The reality is our judicial system is based on whether or not you can get competent legal representation. You can be 100% justified, have crappy representation, and you'll do time or you'll be convicted.
We see it happen every day.
Which is why 9 years ago, a group of attorneys in Houston developed and came out with US LawShield, right, because they saw that, and they saw that law-abiding citizens, such as ourselves, were getting the hack in the courtroom, and it's draining the bank accounts, and it's devastating to people's lives.
Right, and that's what that's the whole point. When Byron brought this up, it was actually in one of our pre-production meetings before we even got started with the podcast. We're sitting around kicking around ideas of what we feel are important. We feel that 2A issues are important. We feel the politics of gun ownership is important. We feel that the safety of the products that we review are important. But the most important thing we all sat around there and laughed at each other. It's like, man, do you have coverage? They're like, yeah, I got coverage. Do you have coverage? Yeah, I got coverage. And we don't see that a whole lot across the gun owning community, especially now. If you notice, in the last year, gun ownership skyrocketed. The sales are off the charts. The NICS checks are out of control. They're blowing up. All this political stuff that's going on is causing a lot of people to walk into a shop like this one and saying, hey, look, I need to defend myself. I need to have something. But very seldom does any, in my opinion, every gun purchase should come with a card that says, you need to look into this. And some gun shops do and some don't, And I think that as a gun owning community, as a 2A community, we are not doing enough to advertise the fact or to at least forewarn people this isn't what you think it is. It is not, being justified means absolutely nothing in some cases. It just depends on how aggressive the prosecutor is, whether it's an election cycle, whether your case is in an area that's going to bring a lot of notoriety to the shooting. So these things people don't think about. They think about what kind of bullets they're going to carry. They think about what holster they should have. They think about, should I have a backup gun? They think, do I have home defense, tactical, whatever.
I mean, to that point, like any shooting is going to be almost intrinsically a six-figure case, right? It just
Right.
the amount of time and energy is required on even the most basic shooting case is six figures. The reality is, even if you're exonerated, you still burn through six figures. And
Absolutely.
You remortgage your house, you refied your house, you've borrowed money from every relative and friend who will help. I mean, not everyone's sitting on six figures in cash, right? I mean, it's one of those situations.
No.
Most people aren't.
That's exactly what we were talking about yesterday. Was
Yeah.
how much a case like that would even cost.
And if I did a shoot, somebody broke into my house, I shot him. I mean, what would somebody expect? I mean, you say six figures. Six figures can be a very wide range.
Let me ask you a question. Someone breaks in your house and you shoot them and they die. Mm-hmm. Okay. What is that? It's murder.
Right.
You kill somebody, it's murder with a firearm. Now, the question is going to be whether it's legally justified to do so. And it's going to come down to it. Craig and I have talked about this a lot over the years, is there's that one moment. There's that one important moment, that one decision. And it's all, if you want, I can answer questions for 3 hours about legal justifications first in specifics, but it's if you are reasonable. That's where it's going to come down to. Right. If that old expression, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. I would. If you're going to have to convince those 12 jurors that you were acting reasonable, that if as a reasonable person in that situation would act that way, and you have to fill it in the box. But if someone breaks into your house and you have to shoot them, the police are going to come to your house. You will be arrested. I guarantee you will end up in handcuffs. You will be taken to the police station. You will be questioned by the officers, and then you're going to go to jail. Now, if you have a really good lawyer, you might not actually have to go to jail. I've had clients where literally did have committed murder, quote unquote. They were arrested for it. Got them out that day, and we worked it out. But that's where the service is really good. We found. We often give these law schools, the LawShield speeches, and talk about firearms in general in the community. It's, good guys and bad guys. Okay, the people who are interested enough, they're going to come to listen to us talk about things. They're the good guys.
Right.
I mean, they're not out robbing liquor stores. That's not their
Fair.
thing.
We talked about that.
Yeah. And these are the perfect people to have this particular service, because there's three main situations that the average person is going to get into. I mean, okay, you got maybe your crazy vigilante person who thinks they're Rambo or something, that that might put themselves in bad situations. But it's going to be, as you were saying before, alluding to before, walking down the street and somebody comes or walk into your car, and someone tries to carjack you, or there's a road rage incident, or someone's going to break into your house. Those are the three big situations. I don't know the exact statistics on it, Craig, but what is it, about 90% of them?
If I was guessing, that's about 90%.
Yeah, and it's really knowing specifically those legal justifications when you're in those particular circumstances. But if you're out there and you're thinking, the big question that you're going to ask yourself, is this reasonable? Would other people think that this is reasonable? You have to act accordingly. My first thing is, and I say this to everyone, and maybe this is because we talked about this before we started. Craig and I do a lot of DUIs. We're both board certified DUI specialists. If you're going to go out drinking, don't bring your gun. Period, end. Because it's going to be a hell of a lot tougher to convince a jury that you're acting reasonable if you're drunk.
So, I mean, back to the question that Byron broaching.
Asked. Yeah, got it.
Well, yes, so I don't sound all attorney and try and impress attorneys. What is the? I know it's going to vary in every case, but what is a reasonable amount of money that one would expect to have to expend on an average case where you have to prove that they are not guilty and they are justified, and it goes all the way to a jury trial?
Through a jury trial?
Yeah, and you finish the trial, and you're.
Are we talking about that shots were actually fired and someone was injured, or they just someone, let's say,
You
flashed
killed
a weapon?
somebody.
You killed somebody?
and you had to go through the
I mean,
entire.
short of
the
$1 million?
problem is, I'll tell you, yeah, it could be. So,
And that's, and, it's an important thing to let people understand. If you shoot somebody at home at night, it's going to be fairly close range, and you have a very good opportunity to kill them or a chance to kill them. And if that happens, this is what I would be the most afraid of as a homeowner, as a legal citizen, as a CCW carrier, as a carrier of a weapon. That's going to cost me upwards to $1 million, right?
yeah, I mean, the reality is it depends on the circumstances, and I know it's like the worst attorney answer you can give. But if you think about it, what's really costing the money is the investigation. So we have to go through, and we have to know the facts better than anybody else there. And then expert witnesses. We have to retain, remember, we can't tell the jury what happened. We can only tell it through witnesses. So either fact witnesses are going to be people who were there, so perhaps your family or loved ones, that's the easy one, right? Or more likely, we have to talk about all the million definitions of reasonableness, and we have to have a million different expert witnesses that are there.
You'd have to forensics. and all
That's
that
the
good
problem
stuff,
is
right?
when we have 12 witnesses lined up, who are all basically there to say that you were justified in what you did, and that's the only way that we can convey that story, the narrative that we need to put forward to a jury. That's where those costs come in. People are like, how could it possibly cost that much? Remember, each witness has to both be retained, they have to generate reports, we have to analyze those reports, then we have to prep questions for them. They then have to submit themselves to questions from the prosecutors. We live in a state where there's mutual disclosure. We basically have to hand over each other's playbook before trial. So all of this stuff takes place. It's not even the money, which by the way is abhorrent and a fortune that it would cost just to do this the right way. But really disconcerting part is how much time it's going to take. So from the time that the gun goes boom to the time that a jury's acquitting our client, I mean, we're talking between 3 and 5 years has now transpired.
And all that time, if you did not have any coverage, you would be footing the bill every step of the way.
Every month that invoice comes in. So I mean, that's just a pitch for US Law for US LawShield. But more importantly, I'm telling people, think of the emotional toll that has on some. I mean, think of how much that would affect your life. Like, not even being convicted. At the end of the day, John and I do our jobs well, and we get an acquittal out of the day. To me, that person has been put through a meat grinder of unparalleled proportion. I mean, that is an emotional turmoil that you can't even imagine. It's the last thing you think of before your eyes close at night. It's the first thing you think of when you wake up. Your entire life is going to be completely altered as a result of that incident. And so what I always tell people, and I carry every day, so I don't leave the house without a piece on me. And I tell people I have both decreased my liability of death or physical injury because I carry, but I've significantly increased my liability in life. And it is one of those scales that you have to take and you have to put forward, and you got to go, I'm willing to take that chance because my physical life, kids, and I have a family, and I like myself, and I want to live on this planet as long as I can. And so there's a decision that I made as a grown-up. But the reality is I understand and recognize that I've incurred significant liability just walking out of the house every day with the firearm on me.
And it's almost, the tone of our conversation almost seems like, hey man, don't carry a gun or whatever the case may be.
It's the opposite.
And it's the complete opposite. You have a right to defend yourself, but just like people take time to train how to draw their gun, the type of clothing they wear, the holsters they wear, the ammunition they choose. This is just one of those steps that is a part of a complete carry package. It's not just about the gun, the holster, the caliber. I mean, people spend more time arguing about gun calibers than they do anything else.
Yeah. I warned you guys that I was a 40 guy. And I was going to take flack on it. That's what it is. That's what I like. So.
And and I think that's the point of emphasis for us as a podcast, as gun owners ourselves, as two-way supporters, and as I guess activists. We want the gun community to understand how important it is. And I don't think this is a sales pitch. It's like pitching health insurance. It's not a pitch. It's like you either have it or you don't. If you choose not to, that's fine, right? But you know what the risks are. But we at least want people to understand what the risks are. We want to know what the benefits are. We want to let people understand that, to me, to a responsible gun owner, and I hate saying that word because it's become kind of fetish, but as a person who's responsible and understands, I don't want to shoot anybody. I never want to shoot anybody. That's not the reason I own guns. I own guns because I like to go out and shoot in the desert. I want to shoot paper. I want to shoot rocks. I want to shoot iron. I want to shoot dirt. Probably not rocks, but
I was about to suggest
I don't want to
Yeah,
shoot people.
probably.
You know? The misperception with the anti-gun movement overall in the country is that gun owners like to shoot people or they like to shoot animals just for fun. We don't do that for fun. We do that as a purpose. We hunt because that's a part of our legacy as a country, and we like to harvest meat, and we help keep the game down. We carry guns so we can defend ourselves. And in order to defend yourself, the defense doesn't begin and stop at stopping the attacker. It's the beginning and then the stopping of the entire process. And this is why I don't think, I'm a little passionate about it because I really think this is a good service. I think this is something that needs to be done for everybody that carries a gun.
Can I jump in real quick? So we do these seminars where we basically go out and offer an hour of our time basically talking to the general public about different shoot scenarios, and people come and they have interesting scenarios, sometimes really great scenarios that they're asking questions about, and we don't mind answering them. But always we're asked about stand your ground, and the problem I have, not with stand your ground as a principle, it's fine, is the only difference between a stand your ground state and a not stand your ground state is whether or not you have the duty of retreat. And what I always tell people is, listen, you're here because you want to be a responsible gun owner. You should try to de-escalate a situation. Whether you have that duty or not, you should retreat. And I always found it interesting how people are vehemently opposed to having to try to de-escalate that situation and kind of retreat a little bit. I think the last thing you ever want to do, I think most of us as gun owners and people who carry every day, the last thing we ever want to do is pull the trigger. It's a nightmare scenario. It never ends perfectly. It's not going to, there is no credits that come up with, harp music at the end of that situation. That's a bad beginning of something. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it is the choice of last resort, right? And it is, you have to choose your safety and well-being, and those are the people that you love or are with, over somebody else's, and that decision has to be reasonable. We'll talk about that. That word reasonable will come up. But if it is what it is. But the reality is we should try to do everything we can to avoid having to draw our weapon and God forbid ever having to shoot it.
We had an employee one time mistakenly discharged a weapon here in the store, and he got himself pretty good with shrapnel, and I had to take him to the hospital, and I left the hospital. I dropped him off. We were real super busy that day. I dropped him off at the hospital after I was waited there probably 2 or 3 hours. And about an hour later, I get 2 Phoenix PD officers come in the store. And the questioning I went through with that, with him negligently discharging a weapon on his own, I can't even imagine what the questioning would be like if it was an actual, a justified shoot where, you
Or even
actually...
you discharge the weapon and it accidentally hit.
Yeah.
Listen, it is what it is. Sometimes accidents happen, but the reality is, that's a scary situation. You probably should, now you know that you shouldn't answer those questions.
Yeah. Well, and I had nothing to hide, it was
The legal advice.
You were like,
He did it!
I wasn't even in the same room when it happened, man.
So Don, let me follow that up
Sure.
with this, okay? Knowing that this is a service that I personally have, everybody needs to have. What is the average cost? What is the cost structure? You don't have to go through the entire thing, but it's not that much. It's like
It's a Don question.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
It's $10.95 a month.
What do you need from people to sign up?
What do we need from them?
Yeah, obviously I'm not signed up yet, but
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna switch up real quick.
Well, we need obviously name, current address, credit card number, of course, for payment, and we issue a membership card with, and they're all state specific. Okay, and you'll have your own number.
To interrupt. You're
Yeah.
national, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Every
Yes.
state you have members.
Yes, and we're working on a few other states as well. I don't know if I'm allowed to say them yet, but I know that we've acquired program attorneys in a couple of other states as well. So I believe that we have presence in about 45 states or so, if I'm not mistaken.
So for a cost of a, #1 meal at McDonald's, you
Right.
get the security of putting your head to the pillow knowing that if you had to do anything.
We get calls. I mean, what happens is something happens, and we should be the first call. And so there's a 800 number. It's an emergency line. It goes through and it patches through, and you get actually one of 3 or 4 attorneys in my office who will answer the phone 24 hours a day.
What are the most difficult cases for you to defend? Where does a gun owner need to know that they shouldn't do?
So brandishing cases, Arizona, the problem with brandishing is that it's so loosely defined that basically anything out of a holster is brandishing. And so there's technical legality that we have issues with, where we had a situation where they didn't want to bring their gun into I think it was a bank, I think it was a federal bank, so they didn't want to bring it in. And then for some reason he got in his head that he didn't want to leave it chambered, so he unholstered in the parking lot and then removed the magazine and then pulled the slide back to take the round out of the chamber. And I guess some anti-gun person saw him do that and then called the police, exaggerated the story a little bit. Fortunately, we were able to get footage, like CCTV footage from that, and showed exactly that his story was true. But they charged him with brandishing in that case. And technically, he was, because that lady saw him do it. That's all that you needed for brandishing. It didn't have to be an aggressive manner. You didn't have to take your gun out and show it. You didn't have to be aggressive. Just literally removing it from its holster. So that becomes an issue sometimes. Those are difficult, but most of our clients are not in situations where they're aggressively brandishing their weapon. I think most responsible gun owners know that you don't pull unless you're intending to shoot. And so we don't see a lot of those,
Actually,
but
be
they
surprised.
are more difficult. Yeah, I guess. We don't see as many of those as other things. And they are more difficult just because you could be morally completely innocent and yet still technically guilty.
But,
And that-
but legally speaking, brandishing is legal if it's in the act of self-defense in Arizona, is it not?
yeah, no, that situation, he wasn't in active self-defense. Like, he
Right.
was literally just,
Unloading his
yeah,
firearm.
and honestly, he was hunched over. I mean, she must have really wanted
in
to
his
see it.
car
Like, I
or-
couldn't figure out how she got, yeah.
So this doesn't even involve a shooting, so.
No, this wasn't even shooting.
Right.
This is
So
anything.
it's not necessary that you're involved in a shooting that you can get help from.
One of the differentiators and the reasons why we're attorneys with US LawShield is because it's any self-defense, any kind of action is covered.
Anybody who asks about knives, this is where it's important.
Yeah, I like to say we have presence in a lot of concealed carry courses throughout the valley. And I like to say that it's from fist to the trigger pull and everything in between, an illegal weapon. Okay, so knives, anything.
is a service for self-defense.
Self-defense
Self-defense,
service.
Gotcha.
true self-defense.
Hey, I'm glad I asked that.
Yeah, so I mean, like, you
Yes.
get into an altercation and you don't feel like you need to draw your weapon, but you feel like, physical, you can handle it, that we would still cover you in that situation. That was a huge point here. And I helped get this whole kind of service legal in Arizona. And unfortunately, the Department of Insurance had previously required, until about 4 years ago, a $50 million bond in order to sell prepaid insurance. And we were able to lobby the legislature effectively, and that was bipartisan, so you have to give credit where it's due. And we were able to get the legislature to pass a reduction for this type of insurance in light of the fact that it's a relatively niche market. Right. And so now you can legally have it with much less of a bond.
How often are you seeing a rise in cases or a rise in calls, or has this been a very...
So our membership's grown. So yes, but I think that's a function of that. Sorry, I'm going to step on you, John. You have something to say?
Well, for us personally, and I didn't bring my notebook here, but we
Don't worry about
have
it.
a notebook this thick full of calls that we've gotten. Craig and I are really, really proud of this. It's hundreds of calls. Not a single person that uses our service that has contacted us has been charged with a crime since Craig has enacted, done his legislation, and we've been working with US LawShield. So
We're
very
able
proud of that.
to. So we're able to. So
you're
by getting on
undefeated.
early, we can.
Undefeated, untied.
I mean, the benefit is by getting us on early, we're able to be incredibly aggressive in conversations and let them know what is coming.
Not me.
And I think aggressive representation at an early stage, as opposed to kind of waiting to see what the state does, it helps diffuse a lot of these situations.
So there is an advantage to having the ball first, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, good attorneys first. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you are. You're involved in some kind of situation, and the more time that elapses between you and your attorney meeting, the greater chance the state has to build a case against you.
Or we can prevent bad. So the problem is, and by the way, I never want to come off as anti-police. My best friend's a police officer. Like, I am pro law enforcement. But if you recognize it from their perspective, their job is to sometimes fit things into a narrative that works for them. And oftentimes, by bringing us on early enough, we can prevent certain pieces of evidence from coming in that would, statements that you would make that you would think are inconsequential are really bad sometimes. So people have a tendency to say really dumb things. So if you ever see people saying, shut the F up, you hear attorneys saying it, there's a reason why.
Well, you're under a lot of stress. God knows what
So
you're saying.
so Joe Schmo goes out, and he's walking. Joe Schmo again.
Yeah, good get that.
So he's walking back from the shopping mall to his car. Some guy tries to stick him up. He's within the zone. He has no way other out. He makes a shot.
Do you quick draws the guy who already has a gun and bullet?
Yeah.
He's pretty badass. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean-
if the threat of danger, serious physical injury or death, if you have that, you're allowed to use deadly force. So if they've got a weapon, you're probably going to be pretty good, especially in Arizona anyway.
He pulls the trigger. Guy drops. What should he do from here?
Immediately call the police first, call 911. This is important and everyone should know this. 911 calls, the second that you start calling, and even before it's picked up by the operator and it's dialing, it's being recorded. Okay, every single time that we have a case in it, we end up getting it from the server down onto a CD, and we get to hear it all later. You'd be amazed the stuff that comes up on here. Okay, one of the famous US LawShield cases that we had is someone broke into their house. And the wife is screaming in the background, "You didn't have to kill him!"
God.
That's in the background. Okay.
Do you guys do divorces too?
No, we got a good referral though.
They're worth it, right? Yeah. So you're going to, I would say, first call the police. There's some basic things that you're going to say because you don't want to get shot when the cops show up there. I mean, the cops have got a job to do. Once they find out that there's a shooting that's involved, you're going to identify yourself. When you're home, I'm in the parking lot. I'm behind Macy's right now. I'm next to a blue Chevy. I'm wearing, what am I wearing? A shirt with a black and white shirt. I have my firearm. Now, if the guy's dead already, you don't need to keep your firearm on you anymore. Okay, and by the way, no double taps. Okay, don't do that. But if you have to fire one shot and you think the person is still a threat to you, you could hold them, at gunpoint down there until the officer comes. I'd kick their gun away. But I'm holding him at gunpoint because I still believe that he is a threat to me, officer. Want to know why? Because when the cops go there and they see this guy's on the ground and he's bleeding and you're the one standing over him with a gun, they're going to think you're the bad guy and they're going to shoot you. So you're going to say, and Bree said, this is what I'm wearing. This guy came to stick me up. I had to do, I mean, he's now subdued. You don't want to get too specific into what you did right there, okay? And this is what I look like when you're going to come here. The police arrive. If you've had to hold them down, you're going to put the weapon down, get it away from you, put your hands up. Again, they're going to put you in cuffs. They're going to put him in cuffs. They're going to put everybody in cuffs. They're going to put you in the back of the police car. All right. From there, you're going to ask, after you hang up with 911, after getting the information, you are immediately going to call US LawShield. And this is, they will patch us through immediately. The calls that we have, they get put immediately through to us, and we're on there and we're going to tell you what to do. And the big thing is going to be,
Shut your mouth.
Shut the F up, it's probably going to be, usually it's going to be officers that are responding first officers on scene, but there's going to have homicide detectives that are come out. You're going to get arrested by the officers. You're going to be sitting in the back of the squad car. The homicide detective, and you to say, if you're on the phone with your lawyer, my lawyer would like to talk to you, detective, and we'll talk to him. They're usually going to say, sure, I'll be happy to talk to him. You could talk to him, but we're going to do it back at the station. No problem. If at all possible, we are going to be at the station before that happens. Okay, if one of our LawShield members gets called, within driving distance, because we want to be there, obviously, or at least be there on the phone to answer all the questions and talk with the police and invoke your right to remain silent. Right. Okay, this is why this is so important. Well, Craig was alluding to this earlier. These cases take 18 months, 2 years, sometimes 36 months. Every single little piece of evidence is going to be reviewed over and over and over again, and the prosecutor's going to be looking for little things that are in there. Okay, if we often do these speeches with police officers and ex-police officers. If there's an officer involved shooting, they don't make any statements. They get to go over there and they have their rep, and they're going to talk to them. They're going to tailor their statement before they go in and they make anything to the investigations board. Even if you're completely 100% justified, you want to talk to your attorney first because you don't want to say anything that's going to be used against you later. But little things would be like little details. Well, this guy, he kicked in my door. He had a crowbar. He was wearing a black shirt and jeans. Are you sure it was a black shirt and jeans? And it turns out that he was wearing a dark blue shirt, and in khaki pants instead. Well, in front of the jury, he's not acting reasonable. He can't even see. All this stuff could come back to haunt you later.
Inconsistent statements are what honestly are the worst thing in the world. This is why attorneys say shut up, because listen, the human brain can only process so much information. When you spike adrenaline, it's a short-term memory killer. And so what happens is people think they saw something. Now, it's irrelevant. They analyze the situation correctly, but their recollection of kind of minor specifics is most of the time garbage. And what happens is when you make those statements and you're inconsistent, then that goes towards whether or not you are acting reasonably and your ability to perceive what you perceive. Because remember, it's kind of an objective standard that's applied on subjective circumstances.
Right.
I know that's kind of a complicated way of looking at it, but if you think about it for a moment, inconsistent statements are devastating in that situation. So you really want to make sure that the first thing you do is call 911, give as little information as possible. I was in fear for my life. Help me. I was in fear for my life. I discharged my weapon. I look like this. I'm standing here. Please come help me. Hang up the phone.
If you're in the house, say, I'm the homeowner. By the way, that's a big one.
And then the next call is to US LawShield, because we patch through 24 hours a day, we'll take the call, and then we will help you navigate the system and the process no matter what it is.
How do you not come off, like, I know that there's some people that say, dude, you can't not cooperate with the officer. You can't just be telling them, talking to
There's no reason to be a jerk.
Right.
And here's the interesting thing is, good officers will recommend it. So we've had situations where officers have, we have to try to get a statement, and then they'll say, it's good to do that. Like, they'll actually encourage our clients after they invoke. Right. They'll say, that was smart. So, I mean, they know what's going on. And the reality is, John, I don't know if you really picked up on it there, but when an officer is involved in an officer-involved shooting, they do not give a statement right away. They are allowed. That's important. It's an important process in order to make sure that they don't give inconsistent statements that can be used against them later. That's a really essential point. I think everybody's entitled to it. Most people don't execute upon it.
And let's not forget, within 10 years, every major city in this country, the officers are all going to body cameras. Right. And it's very, very prevalent here in Arizona now. Right. If you're making a statement, it's on a body camera, right. For inconsistent statements. I've never had a jury, and I've done a lot of jury trials, that has held it against a person for invoking their right to remain silent. I mean, it's a constitutional right. Some people would say just as important as the Second Amendment, or no, not as important as the Second Amendment, but an important one. Anyway, they're not going to hold it against you. And in fact, there's specific instructions that are read by judges when you're going to go to the jury that it's going to say, one, you can't hold it against a defendant for not testifying, and two, you can't hold it against it for invoking the right to remain silent or asking for counsel.
How often have you guys had to go to trial?
John and I have both done over 100 jury trials.
To
verdict, yeah.
For customers of...
Not for customers. We've been able to keep...
Very, very lucky.
Yeah, with LawShield customers.
So the idea is nobody wants to go to trial, right? Except for maybe the prosecutor.
No, honestly, we try to make it so no one wants to go to trial. I mean, the reality is no one wins in a trial, and we try to create situations where we're able to extricate our clients from the criminal justice system.
So ideally, if I were involved in a shooting, I get you guys involved. The ideal situation is you head it off at the pass, and the prosecutor decides not to prosecute or drops the case, right? That's what is the dream scenario in any kind of shooting. Yeah.
I represented somebody, very, very nice man, 78-year-old man, no prior criminal history. It was basically a road rage incident, to make a long story short. I could talk for about 2 hours about it. But he did have his weapon, and this guy cut him off and basically rammed him off the road. And this guy, being a little tough, full of vinegar, followed him. Instead of calling the police, chased him out. You're not going to get away with slamming into me. The guy pulls off to the side of the road. My client pulls off next to him. This guy comes up, and again, my guy's in his 70s. This guy is in his early 40s and apparently, built like a boxer. He picks up a rock and starts banging it into the window. Like, after him, my guy gets out, pulls his gun. The guy says, expletive, I'm going to take that gun and shove it up your whatever. No, we're not. He never even fires a shot off at him. No, we're not. You're gonna get back in your car, and I'm gonna get back in my car, and we're gonna call 911 right now. The guy gets in his car and takes off driving. What my guy does not know, is that this guy's wife is in the car. My guy calls 911. They say, okay, just pull off at the nearest highway exit. This or specific one, this exit. Well, they also called 911, and it was 2 against 1. They believed him, and not my guy. And my guy, who's 74 years old, is put on the steaming hot asphalt, taken into jail, dragged down into custody. The prosecutor and the initially, they're talking about a $50,000 bond Luckily, I was able to talk with the prosecutors ahead of time, and they got him released. Then we did something called the Trebus Bashir letter, which I went through, and anything good that's ever been said about my client, we had it said there. But this had to be done quickly before the prosecutor jumps on it. I sent it down to her, and they ended up actually not charging him. They dismissed the charges. But that was not a LawShield client. That was
And that cost a fortune.
Yeah.
And the reality is that was one of those situations where if we hadn't been in on it early, that would have 100% been, they would have gotten
He'd be in
through
prison.
grand jury and he would be in prison right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
Sorry, it's kind of a value add.
No.
Not going to jail is good.
Yeah.
So, is it smart to fire a warning shot if you're ever in a situation?
Never.
That was a question from a viewer. by the
Yeah,
way.
no, I mean, the reality is warning shots, I think, are the worst idea in the world. So if you're in a situation where you've drawn your weapon and you feel you have to expel a round, it better be because you have imminent fear of death or physical injury. So if you have the ability to file a warning shot, to me, that's evidence that you weren't in imminent threat of physical injury. And so you're going to get charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon,
Probably attempted murder.
maybe attempted murder.
And, a lot of people also, a lot of gun lore is just shoot them in the leg. That's that.
Because actually, shooting someone in the leg is equally fatal to any other. I mean, you have your femoral artery right there. I mean, you're going to bleed out. So I don't know that that's very helpful. Plus, it's not a very good place to shoot people. Plus, it shows that you didn't think that you needed to shoot somebody in the torso. I mean, listen, if you shoot somebody and it hits him in the leg, it's one thing. But if you now make a statement that you tried to hit him in the leg, what does that show? That you weren't in immediate fear of physical injury or death. Yeah. So that's evidence against you.
And by the way, they're not going to hold it against you.
Off camera question. So, one shot versus an empty magazine.
He has a different perspective on it. We have similar perspectives, but he feels like I feel like you shoot until you're done, and sometimes that requires more than one. John feels like it's evidence of not. Yeah. See, I knew I was gonna catch it.
You only need the one. Just keep pulling. It doesn't matter where you hit the person. I get that question a lot. It's like, what happens if I shoot the guy in the face? It's going to look like I was trying to kill him. I'm like, no. I mean, quite frankly, when the adrenaline is pumping and someone is coming at you, just, we obviously the training, you try to hit the biggest center mass. But if you're lucky enough to hit him when someone's coming at you with a knife or other deadly weapon where it's going to be justified, great, you hit him. I think that if you empty a clip into somebody, it could show evidence that it's going to be very hard to sell a jury that a reasonable person thought that it was necessary to put that many bullets in somebody, because unless they're on PCP or they're Brock Lesnar, they're probably not going to still be coming at you.
Would it not show fear?
Yes. So that's where I come in, and I say, listen, that it was required. The concern is, and it's a valid concern, if you think about it for a second, what if remember, this is now, it's hindsight's 2020. So what if shots 1, 2, and 3 were non-fatal? Right, and someone goes down, you can be charged for murder because of shots 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 that were fatal. So if they can prove somehow what order the rounds went in, you can now be charged in that moment. Well, it was reasonable to use rounds 1, 2, and 3, but all subsequent rounds when the person was now incapacitated and you can get that they're already on the ground. You know what I mean? Because it's a retrospect, and it's probably bad to recommend emptying a clip. Although I think I understand it a little bit more than most, and I think there's ways around it.
You can be acquitted either way. I mean, as long as it's going to be justified.
It will be hard. It will make our lives a little bit more difficult. So take John's advice. But I think I understand the tendency or the thought process behind doing so a little bit more.
Well, in training, they tell you to just fire until the threat
So you hit
stops.
click. Yeah.
Yeah, but then if you talk to any police shooting, if an officer actually does empty a clip, believe me, he's going to be questioned. Officer, when he was falling backwards after the fourth shot, why did you continue firing your clip? So goes
I have
both
a
ways.
40.
And again, it's about if it's reasonable for the person. We're not the average reasonable police officer.
Remember, everything's being scrutinized, and John said it's a moment. Remember, this is this is a flash of time that is just so quick, right? It is just that one moment, but then that one moment's going to be scrutinized like an NFL play by 17 people for the next 3 years. And the real concern is, how many times in real time when you watch an NFL play does something look okay, and then when you see it slow down and just it just excruciatingly examined, then it becomes, oh, maybe that was a fumble or maybe that was a drop. So those little things come up when you can do that, and that's what time runs against you with. So I hope that answers your question with a non-answer.
So if we
Thank
have,
you off camera.
So we discussed the benefits of having the service, all right? So let's say now we want to talk about the dangers of not having it. So I'm the guy, I shoot a man, he drops, I don't have the service. What happens to me from that point until prosecution? I go in a cop car just like everything else. I get to the station, I have no attorney.
And at that moment of need, you're going to have time to look through a list of attorneys. You don't want that. You want bang, bang.
Or what if I don't even? How many people do you know have attorneys on retainer or have the mindset to say, okay, like you said, I want my attorney's phone call, or where are you going to go? Man, you just shot
They don't
somebody.
have to tell you.
Your moment of need.
Right.
It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, you're looking at a public defender.
So you're definitely
Yeah.
at least spending
Right. And
days
you're
in
right.
jail, right?
So it's until you have your IA, until you get a bond. And by the way, if it's in a gun case, the state is always asking for $50K, $100K, $200K in bonds.
So you have to come up with $5,000 in cash, $10,000 in cash to bond yourself out, or put your house up.
Right, and then
Right.
you're gonna. I mean, what we see happen regularly in situations like this is, you've already lost your job, right? Because you've been in custody for X amount of days. Even if you're self-employed, you're now taking a hit because you've been in custody, you lost all those. You know what it is. I mean, it's a big benefit of being self-employed is you get to pick which 16 hours a day you work, right? So whatever the situation is, you're now up behind the 8 ball, and now all of a sudden the bills are starting to come due, and you have to sit down with us. And now we're 4 days past, so we've missed some of the opportunities to stem this off kind of early, which we like to jump on. Those have passed, but it's not impossible. We'll jump on the case at that point in time. Once you're out of custody, your families come up with 10, 20, 30, 50K, depending on what it is. And we go from there. And we
And
just
the
start.
best you get a public defender.
Well, if you don't have the cash to come up with what we charge, which is high, we charge a lot, then you're going to be waiting to talk to your public defender. You're probably not going to get out of
And
custody.
all that time, you're sitting in jail.
Yes,
Unless you bond it out.
unless you've bonded out.
So, and like I said, this isn't selling a service. I mean, it's $10.95 a month. I'm not trying to sell a $50,000 gun, right? I'm trying to sell the service, not just necessarily US LawShield. Obviously, they're here and they're great people, but just in general, if you don't have US LawShield in your general area, you got to look into something, right?
I broke it down one time when I did one of these speeches. I still have it written down in my notes here. So it's $10.95. I tease him about this every time.
Yes.
It's $10.95 a month, $131.40 a year. So that's over 30 years. 30 years of coverage. $3,942.
People
Like
say-
I
people drive
wouldn't
down
do
a
a
gun,
misdemeanor shoplifting
right?
case for $3,942.
So there, to me, it's a no-brainer. And then we talked amongst ourselves, and like I said, we wouldn't have you guys on. We're not doing a commercial for you, man.
No.
We're doing a service.
Wouldn't
for
mind
the
if you
gun-
do, but it's okay.
Not even for the law.
We don't pecuniary gain in it. We
And
just get
honestly,
retained when it
it's
happens.
a service for the community. It's a service for the community because nobody's getting rich off $10.95 a month. Nobody's going poor for it. People piss away money, or people waste a lot of money, way more at $10.95 a month.
Well, the reason why I did it was it's not as much of obviously the benefit criminally if something were to happen, but the benefit civilly, because we're such a sue-happy society nowadays that even if you're exonerated on the charge, you're still at risk of getting sued for it.
And like Craig said earlier, when they come at you civilly, they're coming for money and
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
And that's it. I had a question for you, sir. We were talking about being overly excessive in emptying magazines and things like that. I had come around some crosstalk in a few CCW classes where a gentleman asked about loading his own ammunition. The rumor in the room was that it was premeditation. Now, I don't know
What
if
was he
that's
loading
true.
it with?
Well,
Right?
it's just using ammunition to reload your ammunition.
Nitroglycerin, maybe.
No, I mean,
Different loads, different
I
things
don't,
like that.
I don't even know. I would file motions to suppress that based off a relevancy ground. To me, that's an irrelevant thing. If I go to the store and I buy it, or if I enjoy making it for cheaper, I don't see any difference in that. It doesn't have anything to do with the state of mind on the day of event. I couldn't imagine a scenario where that could even be come in for a premeditation claim. That being said, I could imagine some prosecutor making it.
and it was
What
one
about
of those things.
about people who like to customize their own, like, carry guns?
So
Changing
there was an
triggers.
officer. So there was a Mesa
That's why I
officer.
brought that up, was
yeah.
because the officer with the...
So listen, I don't want to talk about somebody else's case. I was not involved in it. That's my kind of formal warning. That being said, he had on his AR, "You're f***ed." And I think that's probably a bad idea. Because if you think about it for a second, these are tools, right? And these are tools that are used for one thing and one thing, or should only be used for one thing and one thing only, right? And if they're used in the way that they're expected to be used, then they will be analyzed and inspected, and that is not a good look. And so I think it was, if not illegal, but unwise.
Well, there's precedent for caliber. Harold Fish is a famous case in Arizona where the guy used a 10 millimeter out in the woods, shot the guy, killed him. And it wasn't the only reason, but one of the incriminating factors in the eyes of the DA, who later he went to jail for, he screwed up. But anyway, the point is that the 10 millimeter was used as a piece of evidence that showed not premeditation, but what was it? Some aggressive use of, he used too powerful
Like
round.
overkill?
Yeah, overkill. But that's
I don't think. I'm not sure that if we shepherdize that would still be good law.
Well, now it's not. Right, back then, but the point is, it doesn't matter if we go back to were you justified, right?
It's all going to go back towards your reasonableness, and remember, it's all going to be looked at through a lens of hindsight. It's going to be scrutinized and analyzed from every different angle.
And that's a perfect case to illustrate to our listeners and viewers, somebody had to do all that forensic work, and if you're doing that on your own dime, you're screwed. Or you're not going to get the forensic work that you need to exonerate yourself.
Well, here's what we do for our clients that have to pay our services, who don't have US LawShields, who pay our services out. We basically walk them through and say, hey, listen, this is what we look at, and this is what the next 12 to 18 months is going to look like minimally. And we want to retain, we need to tell this narrative. This is the story that we need to tell. We need to hire these 5, 7, 10, 12, whatever it is, expert witnesses in order to do so. Here's their price sheets for each one of them, and here's what the expected time is going to take in order to get them to a point where they can testify. And it could be $20,000, $40,000 an expert in total.
Not including, excluding.
And this
Private investigators as well to do research on the victim.
And this is what drives people to settle their cases and get.
We see a lot of, honestly, we're privy to it. I mean, John and I are both tapped pretty well into the community, and we hear a lot of stories about people who are taking plea offers, and I don't blame them for taking them, but they were innocent.
Right.
And so they took a plea offer because they couldn't afford the defense that they wanted, and they couldn't risk going to jail for the rest of their lives. And so they're going to go to jail for a small amount of time because that's what could be extracted. And so now their life is forever changed. They're forever a felon with a dangerous weapon. It's not going away. You can't expunge it. And so there are quite a few people who I think are factually innocent, charged anyway, and who end up taking pleas just to try to get themselves out of the criminal justice system so that they can, see their kids grow. So go in for a year. I'll miss second grade, but I won't miss, their wedding.
And you immediately lose your 2A rights. Your
Oh, that's
exam.
100%. That's
it.
on the floor. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah.
A big thing. Oh, sorry, God. A big thing to remember about self-defense in general is this is an easy way to remember it. You're allowed to use the same level of force that the person is using against you. And I always like the old Roadhouse example. Like, oh, it's okay if you get into a fist fight with somebody, you're okay. Same thing with defense of others. You're allowed to use the exact same level of force that's being used to your friends. So if someone is, beating up you here, I mean, I could go up and I could punch the guy in the face to get him off him, but I can't grab a pool cue and crack him up over the head with it. And
with using a firearm or any other type of deadly weapon, it's the exact same thing. They better have a deadly weapon too for you to be automatically justified in using it. Now, the example that we always get are people, the good questions that we get is, well, what if I'm a 105-pound woman and this person's on top of me and he's punching me and punching me and punching me? I mean, yeah, if you walk over and get off of her and you have to use your firearm, in order to get him to stop her from killing somebody, you're probably going to be okay. And then Arizona, we have some specific crimes that you're allowed to use deadly force for to prevent crimes, and it's going to vary from state to state.
Wasn't there recently, I don't know how many years ago, but here in the state, a DPS officer was in trouble off the I-10, and he was saved by a citizen.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, by the way, I don't think we even clarified this at the beginning. This is not legal advice, guys. This is
I was going to give the caveat at the end, so yeah, we can do it now. Yeah, nothing here creates an attorney-client privilege, and this is not technically legal advice. It's just kind of general advice that happens to be of a legal nature.
no. It's important to get a general broad stroke of what goes on, what the service is, and why it's important to have it. But I just didn't want anybody to take anything away from it that we're, even though these guys are professionals, we're not on professional time. We're not on their dime.
The reality is that every situation, any attorney worth their salt is going to say it depends to every question. Because the reality is it depends. Like it depends on what the person was, what they were wearing, what they were looking like. There are a number of factors that have to come into play that it is just required in order to analyze the situation.
Depends on your municipality, where you're at in the country.
It does.
Heard a million different answers to this question.
I'll make it 1,000,001. Let's hear it.
Type of round doesn't matter. Hollow point versus full metal jacket.
If it gives you any indication, I carry 40 cal, which I'm taking crap for, but they are hollow point. And so the answer, does that increase my liability? I don't think so. I don't think it shows premeditation. It shows that I am only intending to use my weapon as an absolute last resort in a place where I feel myself or those I love are in imminent physical danger, and I want the round to count.
you FMJs have a chance to travel straight through and go into backdrop that you don't want to.
Absolutely does. And I've just, there's a million different opinions on it, and I've heard people say that, if you're using a hollow point, it can be misconstrued as
It will be.
premeditated.
The reality is,
and
it's not premeditation, because remember, premeditation is the act of the trigger pull, right? And so it has to be there. Now, the tool that you utilized is the one that you have on you. And in this particular situation, I'm confident enough that in my ability to analyze the situation, but remember, I'm increasing my liability. I completely recognize that my weapon will only be discharged in a circumstance where like milliseconds matter, because I will wait until the absolute last moment to pull the trigger. I do not want to kill somebody. That is the last thing I ever want to do. But if I'm carrying my firearm, I recognize that it's a real possibility. It would only arise in a situation where I felt my life or that of those around me was in imminent physical danger. And if you have that, then it doesn't matter what round you have in there. It doesn't matter if you pressed your own rounds or not. It doesn't matter what caliber you're carrying. That decision, those are not premeditated decisions. That's just a matter of preference. That's chocolate and vanilla as far as I'm concerned. You agree or disagree, John? I'm curious.
On everything other than,
The clip.
well, obviously here in Arizona, you're only allowed to have one discharge per trigger pull. And, after what happened in Las Vegas, with the kits with the modifications and whatnot, that if you get caught with that, with a machine gun basically in Arizona and you've shot somebody, forget it.
Yeah, so the toys that you have, your bump stocks, if you have a modification or you have something that you're not supposed to have, that is not a home defense weapon. That's a toy you use in the desert alone. Don't have it, by the way. That's the legal advice. But if you're going to have it, you can't use it. That's not a
Why are you
self-defense
looking at
weapon.
me?
I don't know why. For some reason, you're making hard eye contact there. You seem most interested in what I was saying.
Don't have that.
You'd want to fire off the most shots. Huh?
No. But the only thing I would add to that, and I did a whole series on gun mods and ammo choices, and it's the boutique ammo. You got some of the ammo today that it looks like razor blades.
The G2 research.
Boutique ammo, is that ammo you get in Beverly Hills? Boutique ammo.
Much, Gucci ammo, right? So it's it's designed. It doesn't say self-defense on it. The only advice I've ever heard from people in the gun community is, if you're gonna carry, your carry ammo should be a self-defense ammo, and you keep the box. It's got the serial numbers on it. It's got the branding on it that says self-defense. that's the only advice I've ever heard from it. So
Well, listen. Remember, everything's going to be an exhibit in trial, and it's going to be analyzed. And remember, so John and I jump in early, especially if you have US LawShield. We should be the second call made, right? So we should be in your ear right away. Again, the facts, we can't change the facts. What we can do is emphasize others, emphasize some, de-emphasize others. But if you have something that's, an etched gun that says you're f***ed on it, is that a fact that looks good or bad for you in that situation?
it's going to cost me more money.
If you have if you have a round that looks like to the average layperson, and imagine most of our jurors in Phoenix Metro or Maricopa County they're going to see rounds before. But if this looks weird, if this looks like you were out there, and if you could be construed as someone who's a vigilante who is looking for a problem because your ammunition has razor blades on, I mean, like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, well, that's unnecessary, right?
Right.
And so if you want to have it for fun, you want to play with it in the desert, you want to show your friends, but if you're going to carry every day, that's not the rounds you put in your magazine.
Cool for shooting pumpkins. Yeah. All right, so with that, we would like to thank you, Craig, and John, and Don for coming in tonight and
Thank you for having me.
shedding some much-needed light on the subject and the service that you provide.
Appreciate it. Thank you for
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
you guys coming in.